We do it, one, because we love it. And two, though, like as you're refining your product, making sure that you're truly listening. It could be easy to try to just move that process forward. But the more that as an engineer or an entrepreneur or anyone in the development cycle, that product management cycle can just continue to listen and refine, the better product market fit that you'll have and the better outcomes, because that's why you're there.
This is Ty with the medDesign podcast, where we hear compelling stories from medical innovators who are making an impact on healthcare. We're about to talk to Neal Piper. He is the CEO and founder of Luminoah. Driven by his son Noah's struggle with tube feeding, Neal has dedicated his life to improving enteral nutrition technology. Neal has spent over 15 years advancing healthcare across 18 countries, beginning at Pfizer's neuroscience division and emerging markets business unit. He's then served as president of Pfizer's Global Health Fellows Alumni Business Network, which has included 350 Pfizer leaders and scientists. So Neal's entrepreneurial spirit has led him to launch other startups, including the Presidential Precinct and a home health company, which demonstrates his commitment to enhancing healthcare and communities globally. So as you know, we have an interest in empathy-first innovation and really patient advocacy. And I really see Neal, and particularly the mission he's been on to address the pain that he and his family have gone through his medical device, as one of the most inspiring examples of this. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today, and I hope you have a lot of fun with us as we have this conversation. Hello, Neal, and welcome to the medDesign podcast.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, Neal, I know you and I have had conversations over the years, of course, but maybe if you could, for our listeners, let's start with having you tell us about your family, especially your son, Noah, and the struggle that you've had with tube feeding.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. Yeah, back in 2019, my wife and I live here in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we started noticing our son, was choking on his saliva and food, and went to University of Virginia Children's Hospital and learned that he had a tumor in the base of his skull. And suddenly our entire world was turned upside down. We got the news. It's almost like a Charlie Brown episode where someone's talking, the teacher, but everything's mumbled, right? And we had a 2-year journey getting chemo with our son, and as a result of his disease state, he ended up needing to be fed directly to his stomach with enteral nutrition or tube feeding, which is a type of therapy where you come home with a pump that needs headspace or gravity feed. A bag you replace every 24 hours. You fill that bag up with enteral formula. It looks like Ensure. You push that and deliver it right to the stomach, and then you sit and wait. We were tethered in our family specifically to an IV pole. That was what worked well for us, and over 12 hours a day, just sitting on the couch, no data tracking, and it was just a really difficult part of getting him better. And luckily for us today, Noah is, healthy and strong as a kid in 3rd grade. He's got a scar from where his port was and his gastrostomy, but overall is doing really amazing. And we're so grateful for this life-sustaining support and this nutrition that he had during that time. But, for us as a family, we really struggled with the current standard of care. And, have now over the past 5 years dedicated my life to helping, over 3 million people around the world that need this type of therapy.
Okay. So could you maybe then, like that moment when you went from, I guess, like kind of going through this traumatic experience and then understanding and recognizing you needed to start your company? Cause that's a big, not everybody comes to that conclusion going through this experience.
I think with, each day we were at UVA, children's, up to 5 days a week getting chemo. And, I think I was just trying to control the controllables, right? Like, what can I focus on in this moment while we're going through this experience, and I couldn't quit thinking about the problems associated with the current technology. You know, is an immunocompromised child. The last thing you want, anyone with any chronic disease state, whether it's cancer, neurological disorder, or GI disorder, is to um, be malnourished because, someone that's malnourished and readmitted, they have a 5x increase of mortality. In fact, 20% of people that die of cancer die from malnutrition, not of the disease itself. And, I was just struck by the fact that, um, we've got decades old technology that we're handwriting logs of when we last fed versus when grandma and grandpa and a nurse fed. And we're tethered to a pole all day in a sedentary way. And there was no personalized approach to ensuring he's on the right macro and micronutrients for his specific disease state. We were given more of a sugary formula, and there was zero value of that sugar content for his specific needs. And so I was just really struck by how fragmented the technology on the market was today. And so, I spent about a decade at Pfizer, and then, commercializing healthcare products, both in the US and about 18 countries across Africa and Asia. Um, because of that Pfizer experience, I was able to really dive in on kind of clinical research and better understand the market size, the current state and standard of care, and to be able to use what I learned to be able to interview providers that were there with me to better understand, why this technology is the way it is today. And so, um, I was doing that, throughout the week, and then a friend of ours, runs Cvo BioHub here in Charlottesville, which brings together the med device biotech ecosystem. And um, I didn't really know where to start at that point, right? And she helped invite me into the network, and introduced us to some IP lawyers, and to ultimately into some engineers. And then I was running a family office startup at the time, and was fortunate to have access to folks and my network to have access to capital. And so learned that there was a huge need. And then I remember it was March of 2020, right after the pandemic started. um, and we were trying to think of a name. That was the first step, right? And when Noah rang the bell at UVA Children's, there's a painting like a rocket ship on the oncology floor, and we talked a lot about space. And so I merged Noah's name with illumination, the measure of light between objects, to make Luminoah, to create a brighter future for people that need enteral nutrition. Um, and uh, and the domain name was available, which is great, right? So it's like, that's the name of the company. So my wife and I agreed, and then from there we were off to the races.
You mentioned you have access to maybe family offices and kind of your personal network, and of course the Pfizer background. But maybe could you talk to us about fundraising? Because it sounds like you've been successful with working with angels and family offices and VCs.
Yeah, so we started with kind of a personal investment. So we skipped the family and friends round, and then raised a seed round, in 2021. And that brought together a family office, institutional, venture capital firm, and an individual angel that came in on that round. And, in the early days, when you have, an early day product, I mean, at the beginning, typically, as many of your listeners know, is you're focused on just proving out a problem, right? What is the current problem that you're trying to solve? And typically, people are experiencing something firsthand, whether you're a provider at a hospital, or an entrepreneur, or a parent like us, and you see a need. And many of us see needs all the time, but they become passing thoughts, right? But there's something that then
Right.
drives a passion to better understand the problem. And I think that's the number one thing, especially in that family and friends stage, is understanding the problem, coming up with some ideas on a solution to that problem. But then, understanding the market size. Is this a large enough market that if we capitalize now, and build something, are we going to be able to, get a 10x plus multiplier, downstream for, investors, which will ultimately become your partners in building a great company. And so, in the early stage, it's important to really prove out the 5 Ps. And, I always think about, proving out in a capital efficient way key areas of the business early on. And then you're going to ultimately need to add additional in larger amounts of capital to those areas later. But the 5 Ps are really first understanding the problem and then your solution to that problem. So, interviewing, real users or providers and ultimately purchasers of that product because, although the end user, it's really important to get good product market fit. Ultimately, you got to sell into some channel, whether it's a home medical equipment channel or DME or hospital or direct to a provider, right? So really understanding fully, who is your customer, and then patenting around your technology. Make sure you have a good, IP firm, good general counsel. It's making sure to get the business set up appropriately, and then understanding the regulatory pathway. Because if you're a class 2, class 1, or 3, that's a very different capital stack, need for getting to market, and then developing a robust, plan around, a product plan and then a commercialization plan, and really understanding how you're going to enter the market, who the key players are. But most importantly, in those early stage, especially in the angel, is who's running the business. What's their experience? Have they exited a company in the past, or what's their experience that they bring into this organization that, as a first time founder, can have demonstrated leadership skills so that, if you're giving them an investment, that they're going to return that investment, 10x plus, right? And that they're driving value. And we, many of us have bracelets that say add value because one of my mentors, Rick Goings, once said, it's like, you're going to spend $1, you need to add $1 to $10 in value, right? Because that's the expected multiple. And so don't waste $1 on the wrong things. And early on, you can use, big firms, and in those early stage, and your burn rate goes up. It's really important to know that you're partnering with, contractors. We work with Trig early on, in our design phase, and that was really critical because we went through, probably 50 plus iterations of the designs of what the product could look like, more in an industrial design. And it really helped us better understand and dial in, what our users are really looking for, right? And so making sure you find the right early on and pressure test those 5 Ps.
And just for that part of that industrial design process is being capital efficient there. And we like to talk about cost per lesson learned, is that for each one of those concepts we played with, our cost for each one of those was relatively low compared to doing a full prototype build on each of them. And so we were able to reduce risk by having a high rate of test, and then like go back and talk to the stakeholders and validate whether or not the solution meets to the use case. So,
That's right. Because as you start moving down that process, 3D printed prototypes to injection molded, those changes become incrementally, in much, much larger capital outlay expenditures.
right. Yeah. And so, I mean, you touched on a number of different things. Did you ever, from a funding standpoint, did you ever get any kind of non-dilutive grant funding, or was it all kind of private
Yeah, we
investment?
were fortunate to get about $1 million in non-dilutive funding. For those in the pediatric space, there's a PFDA grant that many children's hospitals are associated with this program. Children's National, Texas Children's, LA Children's, so SWPDC, CTIP, and they're fantastic grants. And not only do you get non-dilutive funding, but you get medical experts that support you, regulatory support, and I was just in New York yesterday with some of these hospitals and folks that part of the program, and grants are really critical early on. There's NSF, there's NIH grants. Those tend to be longer duration. You need a PI, typically a PhD, that can help submit those longer timelines. There's a Virginia Callis grant in the state of Virginia that's fantastic, bringing together multiple universities. And then each state tends to have a grant. Like for instance, in the state of Virginia, in the Commonwealth, we have a CCF grant that provides support. But each state, depending on what state folks are in, can provide a lot of support early stage, which is really critical when you're refining and proving out a concept before you get into more of the institutional dollars and angel funding.
Was anything from your Pfizer training or leadership group? I mean, like you mentioned earlier that like as investors are looking to, I guess, look to that leader for a startup, but was that something you would fight back to for, I guess, like being able to make sure if you were given $1, you were able to return 10? I mean, could you touch on some of that, like some of your background there?
Yeah. So, right out of college, I joined Pfizer's neuroscience division, and I carried the bag. I was going to, providers and hospitals across the state of Georgia. And, I learned a lot about, really understanding the needs of a provider and the challenges that they're facing, and how our products would fit into, helping support them from a pharmaceutical standpoint. And then, later led a group, a Pfizer alum through a global health fellows program where we had 350 Pfizer leaders that were on emerging markets assignments, all around the world. And I ultimately lived in Southern Africa, in Swaziland, now Eswatini, for about 6 months. And then from that experience, went on to Population Service International, the largest kind of healthcare NGO in the world, to help with HIV and child and maternal health programs in places like Somalia and Nigeria, Nepal and Cambodia. And through that work, we were in under-resourced environments where you need to go into a new country. For me, you're in the field for a couple of weeks, seeing the healthcare systems, and then running a multi-week training, and then providing kind of some ways to better optimize distribution, pricing, kind of go-to-market strategies and marketing strategies. And that was with a very small, amount of resources doing this. And so that experience really taught me to one, before coming out with a solution, to make sure you're just listening to as many people as you can. And not just assuming out of the gates that based off of what's happening in one country or in one market is something that will work in another. And that was very humbling experience in my 30s, earlier on in my career, to be able to learn that, right? So I've brought that back into the work that we do. I learned, I dealt with a lot of challenges working with different government officials around the world, and learned that leadership oftentimes was the problem, right? Where you have broken health systems, and so and that's hard to solve. And so when you're running a startup, for anyone that's listening, that's looking to start a startup, don't go into the journey thinking it's easy. And there's no use of telling yourself it's hard each day. Just assume you're signing up to something that's very, very difficult, that no one else has solved from a technology perspective you're building. There will be speed bumps along the way, but just assume that's what you're signing up to. If you're not ready to sign up for something that's really, really difficult and you can't lean into that, don't do it. Let someone else take care of the problem. But if you're ready for that, sign up, because it's an incredible journey. But learned a lot of skills that ultimately, those skills became muscle memory that I could, overlay into, having a lot of resiliency and driving a vision forward and hiring and building a company that can truly transform the lives of millions. So feel honored to be a part of that.
It's inspiring and incredible. I mean, working in low resource settings and then moving into a pediatric device market, which itself is a pretty small like market size, and then to be able to like lead effectively into that space, which sounds like a lot of grit and integrity. I mean, it's really cool what you're doing. I'm so glad that you're on to talk to us about this.
Thank you.
I wanted to maybe also talk about patient advocacy because I know that you yourself were advocating on behalf of your son, but then also kind of how you've been able to stay connected to other people in the patient population and kind of how I think maybe some of your ongoing engagement with some of those patients. How could you speak to some of that? Is like you're making sure you're aligning back to what the overall needs of parents and then their children would have.
And so in the early days, we just used our network of other people who had kids that were tooth fed, and then meeting with providers and other healthcare professionals in our network to connect us to the other patients. And then that network grew quite significantly over time. We did a pretty large human factor study, and then we're a part of OLI and Aspen, which are two patient advocacy and clinical um, organizations. And so we're at those conferences, each year, and so now we're connected to, probably hundreds of people that you know are really looking for some new technology, and we've been getting feedback, and summative and formative feedback, through this process. And there's times that people when they are in those settings, that are in tears. One thinking about what they're struggling with day to day as they're managing chronic disease with, you know, with just in general, but then as they think about what's possible for them in the future, mm, it's an overwhelming response of how life can change as a result of a modern technology that, you know, really detaches you from clunky technology that tethers you to your home, to something that fits in your pocket that can pump against gravity and really personalize care and provide better outcomes and really enable people to just live their life the best that they can, and be empowered with their own data and help, hopefully as a result, improve the outcomes of their disease and shorten the duration of disease. And just a whole different way of thinking about life. And so to me, like, that's why we started. And every single person that we hire, they have to be on that same mission with us. We've actually never had to use a recruiter to bring in a team member. And oftentimes it's someone that's been impacted with a loved one, whether it's a kid or a parent that knows that has experienced the pain points that we experience, that has engineering or commercial expertise, or someone that came and pioneered the artificial pancreas insulin delivery space that wants to do that in a similar therapeutic or a different therapeutic class. Mm. But to us, like, what I'm most excited about is the day that, we're FDA cleared, and we finally get to see a child or a mother or a grandparent, use our device and see the impact that it has on them.
You were touching on the human factor studies that you were doing as part of your FDA submission. And as much as that is a requirement, I think the effort that you went through and the stories that you gathered as a result of making sure it's safe and effective for use, I mean, that to me is there is so much value add from that requirement in the process. It seems like just, kind of making sure you get those stories and making sure you've like really added value for everybody.
You learn a lot. the more you can talk to, end users, right? In general, we do it, one, because we love it. And two, though, like as you're refining your product, making sure that you're truly listening and specifically engineers and getting focused on, moving a product through, the development process. And so it could be easy to try to just move that process forward, but the more that as an engineer or an entrepreneur or anyone in the development cycle, that product management cycle, can just continue to listen and refine, the better product market fit that you'll have and the better outcomes, because
Mhm.
that's why you're there, right? I remember, um, we're all here because we want to improve lives, and that's a great thing about healthcare as an entrepreneur, and as you're getting into transformative technology, you get to wake up every day, building something